Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah, welcome back.
This time we're going to be looking at a pretty fascinating source about predictions for the year 2025.
Yes, predictions for 2025.
Now, full disclosure, this is all from the early 2000s.
Right.
So,
Not 20 years ago or so at this point.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So we're going to see how these folks did predicting what the world would be like in 2025.
And especially in Japan, because this source is specifically about Japan.
That's right. So the source is called Dudo 2025 CEDO.
Uh-huh.
Now, you might have noticed that's in Japanese, and you're right.
That's right.
So thankfully, we've got the translations so we can go through this and see what they had to say.
Yeah, it's a long source, too. There are like over 100 different predictions in here.
Wow, 100. Okay, so we're going to try to pull out some of the really interesting ones for you today.
Right.
And just to give you a little taste,
Mm.
one of the things that popped up over and over again in these predictions is robots. Like robots everywhere.
Everywhere.
So we're not just talking about like little robot vacuums.
Right.
We're talking about robots helping with housework and elder care.
Uh-huh.
They even predict robots that can save people from drowning.
Like a high-tech lifeguard.
Exactly. So what do you think about that idea? I mean, it seems like they were really envisioning robots being integrated into every aspect of life.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how much emphasis there is on robots in this source. They even predict that robot populations will exceed human populations in developed countries.
Wow, that's a pretty bold prediction.
It is, and it kind of makes you think about what that would actually look like. I mean, imagine a world where robots are doing most of the work. What happens to human jobs then?
That's a good question. Does a robot-powered economy benefit everyone, or does it create new inequalities?
Yeah, it's something to think about.
For sure, for sure. Okay, well, let's move on to another prediction that caught my eye. This one's about communication.
Oh, okay.
And it's the idea of portable automatic translation devices becoming a reality.
Wow, so no more language barriers.
That's the idea. You can travel anywhere in the world and communicate effortlessly with anyone.
That sounds amazing, like something straight out of Star Trek.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, as cool as that sounds, it also makes me wonder if something would be lost along the way.
Like what?
Well, would people still be motivated to learn new languages if technology could bridge the gap so easily?
That's a good point.
Could we see a decline in linguistic diversity?
Yeah, it's a classic example of how technological advancements can have both positive and negative consequences.
Right, it's like convenience versus cultural richness.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about another big theme that comes up in this deep dive, and that's energy.
Okay, energy.
Yeah, it seems like they were predicting huge innovations in energy technology by 2025.
Like what kind of innovations?
Well, for one thing, they predicted that super high vision technology would become widespread, which would require a ton of power.
Right, so they needed to find ways to generate more energy.
Exactly, and they were looking at all sorts of options, like advancements in solar power, fuel cells, and even hydrogen as a major energy source.
It sounds like they were really starting to think about the need for sustainable energy solutions.
I think so. They even predicted big things for lithium-air batteries.
Lithium-air batteries? What are those?
Well, they're basically batteries that are supposed to be much smaller and lighter than current batteries, but with way more capacity.
Wow. So, like, your phone could stay charged for days?
That's the idea.
That would be amazing.
Right.
But is that even possible? I mean,
Well, according to this source, they thought it would be possible by 2025.
interesting.
So we'll have to see if they were right about that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, let's move on to another exciting area, the materials of the future.
Ooh, materials.
Yeah, this source is full of predictions about new and innovative materials, like self-healing ceramics strong enough for aircraft engines.
Wow, self-healing ceramics. That's incredible.
I know, right? And they also predicted the rise of bio-based materials designed to replace traditional plastics.
So, like biodegradable plastics.
Exactly. And they also talked about flexible displays, like you could read your newspaper on a thin, bendable screen that updates in real time.
Wow, that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It does, doesn't it? I think it's a really cool idea. I mean, imagine a world with less plastic waste, where everyday products are made from renewable resources.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Right. But of course, the big question is, can they actually produce these materials on a large scale and at a price that makes them competitive?
That's always the challenge with new technologies, isn't it?
It is, but that's what innovation is all about, pushing boundaries, overcoming obstacles, and finding creative solutions.
I like that.
And speaking to creatives, This source also includes some predictions that are, well, let's just say they're a little outside the box.
Oh, really? Like what?
Okay, well, we've got 3D printers making meals for the elderly.
Okay, that's interesting.
Military robots capable of performing specific tasks on par with humans. A little unnerving, if you ask me.
Yeah, that does sound a bit scary.
And get this, a human washing machine showcased at the Osaka Expo.
A human washing machine? What in the world is that?
I know, right? It's not exactly clear from the source what they meant by that, but they describe it as a high-tech relaxation device.
Well, that's certainly intriguing. I guess we'll have to wait and see what that's all about.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more mysterious predictions in this source.
For sure.
But, hey, it speaks to the boundless creativity of human ingenuity, doesn't it?
It really does. So before we got sidetracked, we were talking about some of those really out there predictions.
Oh, yeah, like the human washing machine.
Right. What even is that?
I know, right? Like, you get in it and it, like, scrubs you down or something.
I mean, it's like a super advanced jacuzzi.
Or some kind of futuristic sensory deprivation tank.
Yeah, who knows? The source doesn't really explain it.
It just says it's a high-tech relaxation device.
It's very mysterious.
Yeah, but I kind of like that it makes you think.
Yeah, maybe it's not meant to be taken literally.
Like maybe it's more of a metaphor.
Right, maybe it represents this idea that people back then were looking for technology that could cleanse us not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying those predictions might tell us more about what people were hoping for or worried about back then than about what actually ended up happening.
Yeah, exactly. Like those caregiving robots we talked about earlier.
Right.
Maybe they reflect a real concern about Japan's aging population and the need for new ways to care for the elderly.
That makes sense. It's not just about robots taking over. It's about robots helping out where there's a growing need.
Exactly.
And speaking of growing needs, this deep dive also highlights something else that's been on everyone's minds for a while now, sustainability.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They were predicting advancements in solar power fuel cells, hydrogen technology, all pointing towards a future that's less reliant on fossil fuels.
It seems like back then, people were already starting to understand the importance of finding more sustainable ways to power our world.
Yeah, and it's not just about energy. They were also thinking about materials, like those bio-based materials designed to replace plastics.
Right. Imagine a world with way less plastic waste.
It would make a huge difference for the environment.
Absolutely. But the question is, can they actually produce these materials on a large enough scale to replace traditional plastics?
And at a price that makes sense.
Right. That's always the challenge, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
But hey, if we can figure it out, it would be a major win for the planet.
Definitely.
Okay, before we move on, I just want to circle back to those lithium-air batteries for a second.
Oh, the ones that are supposed to last for days.
Yeah, I'm still kind of amazed by that idea.
Me too. It would be a game changer for so many things.
Right. But here's a question. What if there are downsides to this technology that we haven't thought of yet?
Like what?
I don't know. Maybe there are some unforeseen risks or challenges associated with lithium-air batteries that we haven't considered?
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new technology and forget to think about the potential downsides. It's like anything else, there are always trade-offs.
True. Okay, well, before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to touch on one more prediction that really stood out to me.
Okay, which one?
The one about military robots, capable of performing tasks on par with humans.
Oh, yeah, that one was a little creepy.
I know, right? It just makes you think about the ethics of all this.
Like if robots can fight wars, what happens to human soldiers?
And how do we make sure these robots are used responsibly?
It's a really complex issue with no easy answers.
For sure. But I think it's important that we start having these conversations now before it's too late.
Absolutely. The future is in our hands, and we need to make sure we're using technology for good.
I completely agree. All right, so we're back, and as we're wrapping up this deep dive into technology in 2025 Japan, I keep thinking about how these predictions really show both the excitement and the worries people had about the future back then.
Yeah, it's like a mix of hope and fear, right? Like, on one hand, they're imagining all these incredible advancements that could make life so much easier.
Yeah.
But then on the other hand, they're also worried about what could go wrong, like what happens to jobs if robots are doing everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of robots, that prediction about 3D printers making meals for the elderly, that one's been sticking with me.
Oh, yeah. What about it?
Well, at first I thought it sounded pretty cool. Like, imagine never having to cook again.
Right.
But then I started thinking about the social side of it.
Yeah.
Like, would this actually help elderly people, or would it just make them more isolated?
Hmm. I see what you mean. Like if they're not even leaving their homes to get food, they might not be interacting with other people as much.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder if technology is always a good thing or if sometimes it can actually make things worse.
That's a really good point. I think it all comes down to how we use technology and what kind of society we want to create.
So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the values we bring to it.
Yeah, like those portable translation devices we talked about earlier.
Right.
They could be amazing for breaking down language barriers and helping people understand each other better.
Mhm.
But they could also lead to people not bothering to learn new languages anymore, which would be a shame.
Definitely. There's always that balance to consider the potential benefits and the potential downsides.
Right, and it's up to us to figure out how to use technology in a way that maximizes the benefits and minimizes the risks.
I agree. I think that's a really important message to take away from this deep dive.
It's not enough to just be amazed by new technology. We have to think critically about it and ask ourselves how it will impact our lives and our world.
So it's about shaping the future, not just letting it happen to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one last thing to think about. This source focused on Japan, but of course technology doesn't stop at national borders.
Right.
So what are some global trends that might affect or even clash with these predictions for Japan in 2025?
That's a great question.
Uh-huh.
I guess we'll have to wait and see how things play out.
Yeah, the future is full of surprises.
It sure is. Well, thanks for joining us for another deep dive into the world of technology. We hope you learned something new and maybe even had your mind blown a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a fun one.
Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember the future is what we make it.
That's right. See you later.